Hi everyone, welcome to another tutorial on UI. So in this tutorial we are going to be covering how to trigger animations, particles, and sound to make the UI interactions a little bit more juicy. And I am going to also show how to set up some toggles and toggle groups to affect different things in the scene. So let's get right into it. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have my options menu here as a pop-up, and I'm going to have it animate in when the user presses the options button on the main screen. So the options button right now, in the previous tutorial I set it up so that it plays a sound effect when you press the button. So what I also want to do is I want to have, when I press the button, that it somehow influences this options menu. And what I'm actually going to do, I could just have it turn this on and off. Let me show you how that works first, because that's pretty quick and simple. So I have my options button here. Under the on click where I'm playing my sound effects, I would hit the plus down here to add another on click event. And I would drag my options menu into this slot. And from the no function drop down, I would choose game object, set active, and check the box which makes it set active true. So this will turn that panel on in the scene. So if I were to just hit play and test this right now, when I hit the options button, it turns on this options panel. And I forgot about that background music. I am actually going to turn this off while I'm working just so that it is a little bit easier to focus. So I have my options button now set to turn on this panel, and that worked fine. If I wanted to have the cancel or the accept button from the options panel to turn this options panel back off, I would select, let's see which one we have. This is the accept button. It would be helpful to name these so I can keep track of them better. So I'm going to name this accept button, and then this one must be the cancel button. I'm just using the text to figure out which one is which. That's why I selected the text. So I'm going to rename this cancel button. Now I can tell them apart. So I'm going to use this accept button, and I'm going to hit the plus under on click, and I'm going to once again drag the options menu into this slot. Now it is important that I am dragging the options menu from in the scene, not from my project viewer. So there is also this options menu down here, and this is not the one that I'm working with. I am only using the one that's in the scene. So back to my accept button, I dragged in this options menu here into this slot, and then from the no function drop down, I would choose game object, set active bool, and this time I will leave it unchecked. So this will actually turn off this panel. So now if I hit play, I'll actually leave the panel on so I can test this one out. And you can see actually the button's animated behind it. So now when I hit accept, it actually turns this panel off. When I hit options, it turns the panel on. So maybe instead of turning the panel on and off, what I actually want to do is I want to animate this panel. I'm going to animate it to come in from the bottom. So I want it to start down here, and I'm going to animate it to come in when I press options, and then animate it back down when it goes away. So I'm just going to bring it down here so it's below the screen. And I'm going to go into my animations folder, which I created last time, and I'm going to create a new animation. I'm going to call this slide in. So this is, I have slide 1, 2, and 3 for my individual buttons, and slide in is going to be for my panel. I could maybe have chosen a better name to distinguish it from the buttons that slide in. So I'm going to select my options menu, and I'm going to drag that new animation down to the bottom right below where it says add component. And just like in the previous tutorial, it creates a new animator component. And then what I can do is I can open my animation window, which is still docked down here at the bottom, and make sure it has the correct animation selected here. And then I'm going to do add property, and I want rect transform, and I want anchored position. So this anchored position, this is the X and Y values for my rect transform. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the one at the end. And I'm going to drag this up, and I can see that the numbers changed here. And so now I can right click and choose add key. And then if I drag along the timeline, I can see that animation happening. And I can hit play to see that in action. So now I'm going to go back to my options button. And now instead of GameObject.setActive, what I actually want to do is I want to trigger that animation. So in order to trigger animations, we actually need to use the animator, which we did not have to use last time. So I'm going to select my options menu again, and here is that slide in animation that I just made. And it is orange, so that means it is the default animation. It plays as soon as this object exists. So what I want to do here is I want to right click down anywhere in this space and choose create state, and then choose empty. Now this new empty state, I'm going to right click and choose set as layer default state. So now this is the default. The default is it does nothing. Then I can right click and choose make transition and drag this over here to slide in. And my slide in animation will play when this transition happens. So what I need now is a condition for this transition. And the conditions we create over here on the parameters tab. There's two tabs here. There's layers and there's parameters. We want to go to the parameters tab and choose this plus. And I am going to choose a trigger. So this is going to allow us to trigger this next animation to play. And I'm going to call this options in so that I can tell this is what I want to have triggering the options menu to do this slide in animation. And so now selecting this little triangle, which represents the transition between these two states, I would come over here to the conditions category and hit the plus, and it automatically fills in the only parameter that I have created. So once we have more parameters, there will be more to choose from here, but right now there's only one, so it automatically fills that in. So now if I go back to my scene and select my options button, and if I come down to the on-click event, so here's where I have my options menu, and I want to change this GameObject.setActive. And instead of doing this, I'm going to do animator dot set trigger string. And here's where I'm going to use that trigger that I just created. This trigger here, which is called options in. It is important to spell it the same way that we spelled it here, including capitalization. So I need to come back to my set trigger string, and I'm going to write options in. Make sure it is spelled the same way and it has the same capitalization. Now let's try from our game view and see how it works. So it worked to play the animation in. It did take a little bit longer than I wanted it to. It seemed like a little bit of a slow animation. So I'm going to go back to my animation window, and I think I'm going to make this a faster animation. And let's test that out. It still was a little bit slow, and I think actually part of that might be because in the animator there is an I think there is a bit of a delay coming from the animator, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to test this by moving my animator window over to the side here so that I can see what is happening when I click the button to trigger this animation. So I can see right now it is playing through that new empty state, and when I hit the options, it actually has to wait until it finishes this state before it triggers the animation that I created. So the way that I'm going to fix that is I'm going to select this transition, and I'm going to try just uncheck the box for has exit time for now, and let's see if that fixes it, and if not, then I will mess with some of these other settings. Alright, so that fixed it. So unchecking has exit time. This makes it so that the animator won't wait for this one to finish. It'll just jump straight into this one as soon as it's triggered. So that is the effect that I wanted. So now I have my options menu animating in when I press the options button. And now when I hit the accept button or the cancel button, I want it to animate back out. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to reuse that animation that slides in, and I'm going to reverse it so that it goes the other way. So I'm going to, I'm going to Control D while I have it selected. And I'm going to rename this slide out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a transition from slide in to slide out. And I'm going to add another parameter, another trigger called options out. And I'm going to use that for this condition. So when I hit the plus under conditions, it defaults to options in. And here's where I want to go and select options out. So it's going to, from the new state, it's going to play slide in when the options in is triggered, and then it's going to from there go to slide out when this options out is triggered. And I probably want to uncheck the box has exit time again to prevent the same issue that I was having before. But one other thing that I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to make an automatic transition to go from this slide out back to the new empty state, so that once it's done playing this, it goes back to the default state so that it can begin the cycle again. Then with my accept button selected, I already have my options menu dragged into the slot here under on click. So I'm going to change GameObject.setActive. I'm going to change this to animator, set trigger string again. And this time it is options out. And let's try it out and see if it works. So it triggered the animation to leave, but it seemed to trigger the other animation as well. So let's see if we can fix this. Actually, I think I realized what happened is I forgot to reverse this animation. So I copied my slide in animation and I renamed it slide out, but I didn't actually change this animation. So what I actually want to do to reverse this is I'm going to change the speed to -1. So this will cause the animation to play in reverse. So this was a copy of my slide in animation, and all I'm doing is reversing the animation. So now let's try that again and see if that fixed it. All right, so now we have, it works to play the animation out. And one thing that I want to make sure is this transition here, I actually do need this one to be has exit time because there's no condition for this one. So once this animation finishes, we need has exit time checked so that it can go back to this new empty state. So I had unchecked this while I was messing with it. So this from new state to slide in should not use has exit time. Same with slide in to slide out, should not use has exit time. But then from slide out back to new state, this one should use has exit time, so that when it's done playing this animation, it automatically progresses to this animation. So let's try that one more time. So now when I press the options button, it brings in my options menu. When I press accept, it makes that options menu go away. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up some toggles. And the first thing I want to do before I do that is I'm going to go ahead and save my scene. Control S to save scene. And then I'm going to replace these two sliders. And since they are in the prefab of my options menu, I do have to open my my prefab up to edit these. So I'm going to remove these two sliders, and instead of these two sliders, I'm going to add some toggles. So I have already imported a couple of toggles that I created, and I'm going to go ahead and place a toggle object, and then I'll show how to set up using pieces of art. So just to show you what the art is, so I have this green highlighted one for on with the circle over to the right hand side, and then for off I just have the circle to the left hand side, so just sort of a standard on off toggle switch. So it's pretty easy to create these art assets. I just used Figma to create them, just using a rounded rectangle with a color gradient and a little bit of a drop shadow behind the circle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Game Object, UI, and Toggle. And so this is a toggle object. It comes with a checkbox and a check mark and a text attached to it. So I'm going to toggle this open and look at what's inside. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove the label. That's the word toggle there. So I'm just going to be working with the art pieces here. So we have a background and we have a check mark. The easiest way to get a toggle to work is to just replace the art assets for the check mark and for the background. So the background should be the deselected version and the check mark should be the selected version. So where my check mark is, I'm just going to grab my on button and drag it into the source image. And I want to choose set native size to make it the correct aspect ratio. And then for the background, I'm going to replace that with my off button and choose set native size as well. And I can turn off the check mark to see what the on and off buttons look like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the toggle object itself a bit smaller. So I'm going to scale this down so that it's not taking up so much of my screen. And then I'm just going to hit play and test it and see how that works by default. So you can see by default, the toggle just sort of automatically works. And this is because it is already set up to just turn the checkmark image on and off. So I didn't have to do anything to get that to work other than replacing the checkmark with my on image and the background with my off image. So the next thing that I would want to do here is I would maybe want to have multiple check marks, or multiple toggles rather, and have only one of them be selected. So maybe this is something where you can only pick one from a set of options. And the on-off maybe doesn't make a lot of sense for that. So I'm just going to use this as a demonstration. Actually, I'll do something a little bit different to demonstrate a toggle group. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to create another toggle. And I'm going to, once again, remove the label because I don't need that. And what I'm going to do is for the check mark, I'm actually going to use the same UI sprite as the background. So I can select UI Sprite here. And what I'm going to do for the selected version is I'm actually going to add an outline. And let's make this maybe a bright yellow color. Maybe turn up the alpha on that a little bit and increase the effect difference. Let's try 2 and 2, or 2 and -2. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this is, I can already test this out and see. So I can see the selected version has the yellow around it. And so maybe what I want to do is I want to have, maybe this would be for like a character selection screen. And so maybe I will have different options for color of, let's say, the t-shirt of the character. So maybe I have a character and they're wearing a t-shirt and I want to have 3 different color options for them. So I'm going to make this one, let's say this is the red color option. So I'm actually going to make this color red here. I'm going to add it to my swatches down here so I can use the exact same color of red. And so then on my check mark, I'm going to choose that same red, which I just added to my swatches. And then I'm going to duplicate. I'm going to make this one my red option. And I'm going to duplicate this. And if you don't like that it has this space over here, this is where the label previously was. You can get rid of that by changing the width to be 20. So I'm going to do that for both of these. And then my second option, this is going to be blue. And so I want to change the background and the checkmark color to blue. And I'm going to add a swatch for this as well so that I can choose the exact same color of blue for my checkmark. And then I'll have one more for green. So I have 3 color choices for my character's t-shirt, for example. I realize I'm putting all of this on the options menu, so I'm just showing this as an example. You could have multiple different menus, one of them for your options, one of them for your character creation, maybe one of them for your save and load menu. So it's just an example. So I'm going to make this last one green and add a swatch for green. And so now when I hit play to test this out, so now I can turn each of these on and off, but I could have more than one of these on, and I want the player to only be able to choose one of these colors. So what we need to do to make that work is create a toggle group. And I just realized I didn't rename green. So what is a toggle group? A toggle group is a way to have multiple toggles that only allow one of them to be set to true. So to do this, we create an empty game object. I'm just going to make it an empty child on the options menu. So game object, create empty child. And then from this add component, we would choose toggle group. So toggle group is a component that we add to an empty game object. And I'm going to call this color toggle group. Then I would select my toggles for each of my colors. And down here there's an option for group, and it is currently empty. So what I want to do is I'm going to select all 3 of these, and I'm going to drag color toggle group into this group slot. And so now I can see each of these. When I select them, it has color toggle group in this group slot. And I need to decide which one is on by default. So I'm going to turn off green and blue by default. And for some reason I can't turn off blue. So let me just try. It's giving me an error that it is not recognizing my toggle group for blue and red. So I'm just going to try dragging my color toggle group one at a time into each of these slots. So now hopefully I will be able to turn these off. So I'm going to make red on first, and let's try it out and see what happens. So for some reason it made green on by default, but it is working now. So when I select one of these, it turns off all of the other ones. So this is exactly the behavior that I wanted to happen. Now let's say I wanted these selections to actually impact something in my scene. Maybe I have a character and I have some art asset for their t-shirt that I want to change colors with these. So we can use this on value changed. This is very similar to the on click, which we use for buttons. So this on value changed is called whenever you click on one of these toggles. And it will be called when you click on any of them, because it is actually turning one of them off. And so this is called even if it is turned off as opposed to being turned on. So in order to actually get this working, we are going to need a script for this one. So I am going to go into my assets folder. I'm going to right click and create a C# script. And I'm going to call this character changer with no space. It's important, script names cannot have spaces. And I'm going to double click to open that up in Visual Studio. So here is that new script that I just made. And I'm going to use this script to create a function for the toggles to call. So I don't need the start or update functions. I do need the open and close curly brackets at the very beginning and end. So I'm just going to take what's in the middle and remove that. So I still have all of my class information. I have the using default things up at the top. So now I'm going to make a new function. And it needs to be a public function so that our toggles can access it from outside of this script. So it's going to return void. So this will be public void. And I'm going to call this change color. And I'm going to go ahead and save my script right now. And I'm going to show how to link this function to the toggles before I write any code for it. So I saved my script. Then I need to attach it to something in my scene. And I'm actually going to create a UI image. And this is going to be the thing that gets impacted by these color changes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have, when I click on one of these toggles, it changes the color of this image. So this is going to be the thing that I attach my script to. So I have this character changer script. I'm going to attach it to this. And so this square is just going to represent my character. So I've attached the script. Now, if I select one of my toggles and on this on value changed, I can hit plus, and then I can drag in this new image. Let me rename this character. So this is my character. So now on my toggle, I would drag in my character image from the hierarchy here. So I just dragged this into this slot, and then from the no function drop down, I can find the character changer script I just made, and then change color. Now if you don't see your script or if you don't see your function, go back and make sure, for one, make sure you saved your script. Also make sure you don't see any red squiggly lines. Make sure you have the correct number of curly brackets. For every open curly bracket, there needs to be a closed curly bracket. And for every open parenthesis, there needs to be a closed parenthesis. So now I'm going to add some code to this script to decide what color this should be changing to. And to do this, I'm actually going to need to have a reference to all three of these toggles so that I can check and see which one is turned on. Remember, this will be called whether it is turning on or turning off. So I need to be able to determine in the script which one is on and use that to determine the color. So I am going to make some public variables here, and they are going to be UI type variables. So in order to do that, I need to add a line at the top called using Unity engine .ui. This will allow me to use UI type variables in my script. And so now here in the open space above my function, so it's after the first curly bracket but before my function. So here I'm going to make some public toggles. So this will be my red toggle. And I'm going to make one for my blue toggle. And then I'll make one for my green toggle. And these variables also do not have spaces in them. Variable names need to not have spaces. So when I call this change color, what I'm going to do is check if red toggle dot is on, and then I need an open and close curly bracket. So if my red toggle is on, I'm going to make this object's color red. So this will be get component, which refers to the object itself. And so that means the object that this script is attached to. So that would be the character. So get component is referring to one of these components, and I want to refer to the image component, and I'm going to change its color. So get component, and for get component we use open and close corner brackets. So get component image. And then at the end of the open and close corner brackets, then we use open and close parenthesis, dot color equals, and Unity lets us use names of some colors. So we can do color dot red, and this is actually just the color red. And so we don't have to figure out the RGB or hex value. So I'm going to go ahead and save this script, and we are just going to test it out to see how it works right now. And I just realized I didn't actually give it the reference to the toggles. So let me drag those in right now. So I'm going to drag my red toggle, my blue toggle, and my green toggle. Now I can go ahead and hit play. So now when I select the red toggle, it turns red, and I have not set any of the others up. So let's go ahead and set up the other three colors. So I'll go back to my script. I'm just going to copy this if statement, and I'm going to paste it 2 more times. So where I did red toggle, now I can also check blue toggle and then green toggle. And if blue toggle dot is on, then I'm going to choose color dot blue. And if green toggle dot is on, then I'll choose color dot green. Save that script. And now let's test that out again. And it is working for red and blue, but not for green. So let's check out the script and see what happened. Actually, I see what the problem is. It's not in the script. I forgot to set up the other two for their on value changed. So right now the only one that is actually triggering is the red, but it does trigger when red gets turned off. So once I hit red, if I hit a different color, it will trigger this one more time. So I actually need to add this for both of the other toggles. So I'm going to go to my blue and I'm going to hit plus. I'll drag in the character. This is my playable character that I am customizing. So then from no function, I will choose character changer and choose change color. Then I will do the same for green. Drag the character into the slot and then choose character changer and choose change color. Now, one thing that's really important here, it does switch this to say character once I've chosen a function, but it's really important you're dragging in the object from the scene. If you drag in the script itself, it's actually not going to work. So we don't drag in the script, we actually drag in the game object from the scene into this slot. And then once we've chosen a function, it does change to appear like the script. It is specifically referring to the script attached to this character though. So that is really important that you are using the script attached to the character in the scene. So let's go ahead and save our scene and test and see if this works. Excellent. Now whenever I select any of these colors, it correctly changes the color of this square. And it also remembers from one time to another. So I accept this change, and when I choose options again, it still has that change. So this is just because I'm not destroying or disabling the object. I'm just, once I have set this, this object continues to exist in the scene. So similarly, this off button, when I bring the options menu back, this is still set to off. So that gives you an idea how to set up toggles and toggle groups and how to trigger animations. I do one more thing, want to show how to trigger a particle and sound to play together. So I'm going to create another empty game object. I just realized I've been in my prefab edit mode this whole time since I've been editing this prefab. So I'm going to back out of my prefab edit mode. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a game object that will have a particle effect. And I'm going to actually set it to play a particle effect and a sound effect from the same game object. So I'm going to create a new empty game object as a child of my canvas, and I'm just going to have the start button play this particle and sound effect just so that I can bind it to a button. So I'm going to create game object, create empty child, and I had the canvas selected, so this is a child of the canvas. So it does get a rect transform. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add component. I'm going to start typing particle, and I'm going to choose particle system. And if you click on this 2D here, you can actually rotate around your scene. And you will see, if you zoom in, you'll see teeny tiny particles. And they are facing the wrong way. They're going backwards through the screen, but I also can't see them through the screen. So first things first, let me change, if I scroll down on this particle system, if I scroll down to shape, first thing I always like to do is change from cone to sphere. So now you can see it's going in every direction, including out in front. It is very tiny. But also in the game view, it is not actually rendering those particles. So even though I can see them in my scene view, but I cannot see them in the game view. So one other thing that I am going to do is I'm going to adjust the start size just so that it's a little bit easier to see. And I am going to also change down at the bottom, there is a renderer. If I toggle that open, then I can choose a material. And if you click the little circle here, you can see the materials that are your options. The magenta means that it does not have a material chosen. You can either choose the default particle, which is just sort of a little blob, or you can choose one of these others, like you could choose the default sprite, which is a square. And this does allow you to adjust the color of those. So if I choose the square and then I scroll back up to the top and choose color, I could make a yellow color for my particle. But we can see even in this preview view, you can see that it's not really rendering in front of the UI objects. So I'm going to fix that by selecting my canvas. And by the way, if you go to your game view, you can really see that there's no particles showing up. So if you select your canvas and if you choose from render mode on your canvas, you can choose, instead of screen space overlay, choose screen space camera. Oh no, now my particles look huge. And oh, there's my canvas. Okay, so so now my particles are huge. I should not have made them so large. So I'm going to select this game object again. This is the game object that has my particles. So I'm going to change start size back to 1. That's a little more normal. Okay, so now from my game view, so I changed my start size back to 1. I might even make that smaller actually, so I could do 0.5. So now I have a particle system that renders on top of my canvas. What I like to do with particle systems is I like to set them under emissions. I like to use the bursts option. So it'll make it sort of like fireworks. So it'll have a burst. So I would set the rate over time to 0 and then hit the plus under bursts. And now I can see all the particles come out at once. And I could reduce the duration and the lifetime. So maybe I'll set both of those to 3. When I change the duration, I also generally change the lifetime. So now I can see how that's working. Another fun thing that you can add to particles is trails, which are a lot of fun. And by default, it is the magenta because it does not have a material chosen. The material for the trails is also under renderer. So trail material right here. I could select the same one, or I could choose the sort of glowy material. And we could also adjust on the start color. We could adjust the alpha so that it is a little bit more transparent. One thing that is happening here is they're actually sort of changing when they go behind some things. So what I might want to do is actually move them so they're out in front. And we could also change the shape. I know I said I like to change from to sphere by default, but we could also set this to hemisphere and then rotate. Let's see, which way is this rotating? So here's my rotation. So I can set this to 180 for my X rotation. And so now it's always in front of the UI elements. So that looks a little bit better. You can also do some fun things like having gravity applied to particles. So that would be under gravity modifier. So maybe we could move this whole thing up. And we could maybe still have this go a little bit faster. So let's change this start lifetime and duration both to 2 and set start speed to 8. And then one other thing that I like to do with particle systems is to change the color over lifetime, which you have to check the box next to it to enable it. And then you can adjust this gradient, which is at the top it has the alpha and at the bottom it has the color. And so what you can do is set, if you click anywhere in this open space, it adds another handle. And so what I do is I like to set the first one alpha to 0 and the one at the end also alpha to 0. So it sort of fades in and fades out. And then obviously when we're done editing it, we will want to turn off looping because we will only want it to play once. And then we can add our sound effect. So I will add component, and we are going to add audio source. And I have the casual game sounds, which I imported previously. And I'll find one on here that I like. And so once I have one chosen, then I will select my game object again. And I've already forgotten which one it was. I think it was this one. So I'll drag that into that slot. I'm just going to play it again to check. Oops, that was the wrong one. There it is. Okay, so I'll select my game object one more time. And it was this one here. And just double check one more time. Okay, so now I have this game object that has a particle system. And it is set to play on awake. And then my sound effect is also set to play on awake. And they're both set to not loop. So now what I can do is I'm going to rename this game object as effect. And I'm going to put it in my prefabs folder to create a prefab. So I take this effect, drag it into my prefabs folder. Now I have a prefab for this, so now I can delete it from my scene. One thing that I might want to actually make note of is where it is located. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to create an empty child game object, and I'm going to just drag it up above effect. And so now this game object is actually at the exact same position as my effect. You can check and see those two numbers are the same. So now I can delete this effect, but I still have this rect transform keeping track of this position. So I could even rename this as effect position. So I'm going to make another script now, and this is the script that is going to play this effect. So I'm going to create a new C# script. And I'm going to call this trigger effect. And double click on this to open it up in C#. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make I'm going to remove the start and update functions just like I did before. Now I'm going to make another public void, and this is going to be a function that I can call from a button. So I'm going to call this start effect. Open and close parentheses and open and close curly brackets. It is important that you pay attention to what you are naming things. For example, I cannot name this the same as the name of the script, so I could not call this trigger effect. I also could not just call this start because there's already a function called start. So you want to be careful that you're not using something that Unity might already have have that name reserved for something. So when I call this function, I'm going to do something called instantiate and resources.load. So what this does is instantiate creates something in the scene, and it creates based on what you put in parentheses here. And resources.load says go to the resources folder and find something with this name. And I named it effect. And I'm going to go to the end of that first parenthesis and put a comma. And so this is where I'm going to instantiate the effect. I'm going to attach this script to the effect position. So I'm actually going to use that position. So it'll be transform.position. This transform refers to the transform of the object this script is attached to. So I will be attaching this to the effect position in the scene. I also am going to use transform.rotation. Then I'll move to the end and add my semicolon. And I'm going to save this script. Now, one thing I need to do is I've said resources.load here that it goes and looks for a folder called resources. I actually put my effect in a folder called prefabs. So the first thing I need to do is fix that by creating a new folder called resources. It must be spelled with a capital R. It must be plural, resources. And I'm going to just take that effect prefab, and you can just drag it into the folder over here for resources. Now when I open the resources folder, I can see the effect is there. So this script, this resources, it does need to be also spelled with a capital R and plural, resources. And then it will find something called effect in that folder. So now I can take my script that I just created, trigger effect, and attach it to this effect position. and I can see the script shows up here. And so this effect position, if I go to my scene, I can see where this is at. This is where I want to spawn that effect. Now I need to link it to a button. I am going to link it to the start button just so that I have a button to use for this. So on my start button, I have, I am already using this audio source.play, but I don't want the two sound effects to play at the same time. So I'm actually going to delete this one. I'm going to use the minus here, and I'm going to hit plus. I'm in my on click for my start button. And so here I'm going to drag in my effect position game object, which has my script to spawn the effect. And under no function, choose the trigger effect, which is the script that I created, and start effect. Now I can save my scene, and let's test it out and see if it works. So now my start button will trigger that particle and sound every time I click the button. I'm not doing any cleanup to delete these effects that I'm creating. So if I was planning on having the user actually press the button a bunch of times like this, I would want to have another script attached to this effect to delete it after a certain amount of time so that I don't have a bunch of them here. But this gives you an idea of how you can trigger particle effects and sound effects, as well as triggering animations and using toggle groups to affect something in the scene. So I hope you found this tutorial helpful, and I hope that this helps you with your UI projects in Unity. Thanks for tuning in.